I always start with this question wherever I travel, because it's a great insight into the way that people are feeling about the world. And so I would just like to do this informally with a show of hands. How many people think the world is worse now than it's ever been? Is it a very optimistic group or a shy group? Excellent. How many people think the world is better now than it's ever been? After 25 years of talking to people about global change and how to think about it, how to incorporate it into business and investment decisions, what I've realized is that something that finance understood a long time ago, psychology and our expectations have a huge amount to do with our open-mindedness and our willingness to engage with the subject matter. Economists call it expectations minus reality equals happiness. And if you had high expectations, maybe you're not feeling that great right now. I like to say that 2025 and Liberation Day was kind of a wake-up call. I've never had to work every single weekend because on Friday night some bombshell is announced. It's something new. The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said yesterday, it seems, that the goal now of the war in Iran is to return to the way things were before, which is not really funny, but it underscores the lack of strategy that is underpinning US foreign policy right now, and having this wide range of knock-on effects, whether it's currency instability, questions about global growth and recession, commodities prices, inflation, etc. And for European countries where we are caught in the middle between a more, frankly, adversarial United States and an overtly adversarial Russia and China. So what if I told you that the most frequent question that I get inside boardrooms is, when are things going back to normal? And I just find this astonishing because, first of all, if we just pause for a moment, when was this normal? Because we had the global financial crisis starting in 2008, and we had the Eurozone crisis. We've had a global pandemic. We had the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This normal that I think exists in people's minds is 20 years ago, right? And since we don't have a time machine, and frankly the past wasn't perfect either, we do have to get our heads around the fact that we're not going back to normal. And if we want to exist in the current environment and thrive and grow and take advantage of opportunities, we've got to let go this expectation that this will pass and we will recognize. And I say that especially to people of my vintage. In my book, I talk about the grief of Generation X, where we had so much optimism about change. If we don't like where things were going, we also need to participate in constructing the future. But to thrive in the world of today and tomorrow, waiting for things to go backwards is not the right answer. So we did some research on my thesis of the Geopolitical Supercycle, which was really about kind of providing a better answer to board and C-suite leaders about how do we know this is real? How do we know that geopolitics isn't just the relentless news cycle and kind of public dissatisfaction, and underlying that question too is, do we really need to change our strategy? Because that's a lot of work. We looked at the period between 2010 and the end of 2024, so prior to Trump 2.0, and we saw a tripling of geopolitical risk events. We had to manually construct this database. Unlike interest rates or inflation or other kind of financial data, there is no uniform database. We looked across 5 vectors. if you look at the increase in trade disputes, for example, a tenfold increase, a doubling in conflict. And the short explanation is an increase in drivers against weakening guardrails is and has been for some time translating into more risk events. The Davos this year and Mark Carney's speech, I think, will go down in the history books. And if you haven't watched it in its entirety, I really recommend it. It is a great example of political oratory, and he wrote it himself. Even better, even more impressive. And he said this at a very contested Davos. Now, having kind of grown up in a large global financial institution with an enormous risk and compliance function, I can say that those words, had I tried to say them and get it past our compliance, wouldn't have passed. We had to say things like evolution or adjustment or paradigm shift or recalibration. But no, I think Carney is right. It is a rupture. And when we start to understand that it's a rupture, we then understand that we have to increase the urgency of our work. The most successful CEOs were not the ones that presided over the biggest profits or launched the best product. They were the ones that managed the challenges of the times, the zeitgeist, most effectively. And this is why, in my view, incorporating these geostrategy concerns is an essential part of being an effective leader. Because managing the zeitgeist is probably the most challenging thing that any of us will have to do. And part of the way that we do it, in the way that we work with boards, is to raise political quotient, which doesn't mean reading the news all the time, because as I just explained to you, news is not geopolitics, but it is doing better at understanding the direction of travel, if you like. Plausible hypotheticals. It's not a very easy term, but it is part of what I do when I do smaller group board meetings, and I will just give you an example of one that I did in December in Zurich with 15 executives from the board of a Japanese insurer. And so I have a little party game where I give each person a card with a plausible hypothetical event, meaning it has, in my view, at least a 15 or 20% chance of happening. So just some of the things I put on the cards. One was Maduro exit. One was regime change in Iran. One was Greenland annexation. I also put in things like California votes to leave the United States. I'm originally from California, and I can tell you that for every year of the last 100 years, had an independence referendum been offered to Californians or Texans, they would have voted for it. So, it's totally plausible. My point is the reaction. The people at the table said, "This is ridiculous. None of these things will happen." And 3 of them had happened within 2 months. This is why I talk about mindset and moving away from the base case and tail risk training to consider a wider range of things that are plausible. There are very few black swans. There are just things that we didn't really want to think about. Geopolitics is a driver of the investment trends and in government's reaction function now in a way that just simply hasn't been true in our professional lifetimes. If you are working in the financial sector, business is booming. Stock markets are booming. Wave of consolidation is certainly happening. But I think that flight to safety idea and stability is one of the superpowers of Europe. And what I gather from some of the conversations I had this morning is also something that Romania can benefit from. So I'm going to stop there with my favorite quote from Louis Pasteur: "Be brave and be open-minded." I think those are the best sort of watchwords for navigating this environment.